They said the desert kept memories, not only footprints, but the way the wind turned when something wanted to stay unseen. My grandmother called a hazo gone wrong. I was 19, sent across the ocean to use her language as a weapon. I thought the enemy was only men with rifles. They paired me with Big Red. He kept his radio like a holy thing. Before the war, he could make a ration tin sound like a drum and make other men fall quiet with a story. On that island, he kept the earpiece warm between his hands and swore he'd carve his initials into the hull of the first ship he saw when this was over. Our job was simple and savage. Speak in Navajo so their machines couldn't understand, and keep men alive long enough to get home. The first strange thing was a breeze that did not belong. We dug behind a ridge of coral because there were no trees for cover. The sun tasted of iron that day. Big Red paused at the set, ear against the earpiece, and frowned. "That's not static," he said. Beneath the crackle, there was a sound trying to copy our words, a rasp that could not hold Navajo grammar. It was like someone trying to hum a hymn through broken teeth. We sent the coordinates anyway. The mortars hit true, and the captain clapped Big Red's shoulder like he'd tamed the ocean. But that night the guards found 4-toed prints leading to our foxhole. The others called it dog tracks or shifting sand. Private Lopez said he felt watched. He was young and kept glancing at the tree-line like a man who knew something in the dark had looked back. I whispered a line my grandmother taught me, a short protection chant, and Big Red caught me doing it. He laughed too loud and pulled his cigarette, as if a laugh could keep the blood from pounding in his throat. Recon men came back hollowed. One returnee sat on his canteen for an hour and could not bring his hands to light his cigarette. "You ever feel like someone walks behind you?" Lopez asked me while we ate cold beans. I had felt it. We found a ruined shrine in the trees. Bone arranged like teeth in a circle, shells hammered in place like eyes. The men who saw it chewed their mouths until they tasted metal. Even then the code had to be spoken. When I keyed the radio, the words turned clean. Navajo syllables folded into orders. Left flank, hold, move. Language saved men. But sometimes the air would go crooked and the radio would sing back with a noise like a stretched laugh. Big Red vanished the morning after the shrine was found. His jacket lay dragged toward the tree line, and his lighter sat on a stone, smoked but with no print upon it. Near the edge of a shallow crater we found shards of his radio, feathers shoved into the cavities as if to quiet whatever voice lived inside. His footprints stopped, and another set began. 4 clear prints heading away from where his trail ended. They wanted reports. The colonel wanted numbers. I wrapped a strip of Big Red's shirt around my hand and keyed the mic. My hands were steady. Inside, something unclenched that I could not name. When I spoke, the radio answered with a sound almost like Big Red's laugh, stretched thin. For a fleeting moment, I heard my grandmother use my Navajo name, the private name she used when she wanted me home, and it felt like a blade under my ribs. Night fell, and the stars seemed to stop. Every frequency turned into an animal cry. Lopez's transmission dissolved into a ragged sound, and then silence. The men started sleeping in shifts with one eye open. Some returned from patrol with a blankness on their faces, as if part of them had stepped out and not found its way back. We mixed old ways with new. I braided a strip of Big Red shirt around my wrist and tasted salt and iron. I left offerings at the tree-line, corn pollen in circles, a little bundle of tobacco. We were soldiers first, and superstitions did not belong on orders. But superstition did not count for much when the radio learned to borrow a commander's voice to call men into a trap. When the commanders filed their reports later, they wrote dates and names and medal recommendations. Big Red's name got an asterisk. They did not record the place where his footprints stopped and another set began. They did not write about a radio answering you with your own prayers as if it wanted to come home. Sometimes, in the quiet, the radio makes a noise that is almost a joke or almost a name, and for heartbeats I think I hear Big Red. The island taught me that language can be a shield, and if something else learns that language, it becomes a key. If you want to call it superstition, call it that. If you call it a trick the island plays, call it that. I call it a lesson. Respect what listens. The men thought we buried Big Red's name with his radio, but I knew better. A man doesn't just vanish, not without leaving something behind that wants to be found. The day after his disappearance, the captain ordered a sweep of the tree-line. Check for snipers, check for traps, he said, but his eyes slid away from the four-toed prints pressed deep into the sand. He'd seen them too. He just needed the word sniper to feel steadier in his mouth. I carried the handset slung over my shoulder like a burden. Every time the radio sparked alive, a whisper threaded through it, syllables that tried to were Navajo, but came apart halfway through. Lopez wouldn't shut up about the shrine. He swore the thing had been waiting for us. It's not Japanese, he kept muttering. It's older. He said he saw bird bones painted red, shells laid out in a circle like a set of eyes, and ash scattered as if something had burned there too long. That night he pressed me. Does your people have stories about this? I told him some things don't need stories. They just need respect. My grandmother had warned me once. If you ever find a place where offerings rot, but never dry, step backwards. Do not turn your back. I had turned my back on that shrine when the lieutenant barked for us to move, and now Big Red was gone. By the third night, the men started hearing their names called from the trees, always in a familiar voice. Sometimes it was a mother, sometimes a buddy. The Japanese were too far to be throwing tricks like that, but something else knew how to coil words, so they sounded like home. At dawn we found Corporal Dunn missing from his post. His rifle still leaned against the sandbag. His helmet lay upside down, and inside it were 3 feathers jammed point down into the liner. Four-toed prints led away again. The captain told us to shut our mouths and keep the line moving. Word didn't allow for ghosts, but ghosts didn't explain why the radio came alive when I hadn't keyed it. Static fizzed, then words half-formed. Move, left, brothers, breaking off in a hiss. Lopez's face drained white. That was Big Red, he whispered. I told him it wasn't. I told myself it wasn't. But in the bottom of my chest I knew that laugh, stretched thin, like rawhide about to split. The patrol that afternoon cut deeper into the brush than we'd ever gone. We reached the shrine again, only it wasn't how Lopez remembered. The bones had been rearranged. They formed a circle wider, teeth-like, with a gap as if it wanted something to step inside. The men went quiet, except for Lopez, who began reciting a prayer in Spanish under his breath. I murmured one of my own in Navajo, words my grandmother taught me, rolling them against my tongue like stones meant to hold steady in a storm. That's when the radio clicked alive again, without my hand. Move, it rasped. Left, left, and then the tree line erupted. Gunfire tore through leaves, splinters stung our skin, and men went down in heaps. The ambush wasn't Japanese clean. It was chaos, as if the trees themselves had spat bullets. Some swore later they saw shapes darting low, running on all fours. I hit the dirt, my face in the roots, and keyed the mic to scream coordinates. The words came out hard, thick in my throat, but the moment they left me, the shells fell true. Explosions tore the ridge apart, and the fire cut off. When the smoke cleared, we counted 2 men dead, 4 wounded, and more questions than we had bullets left. Lopez grabbed my arm. They used your words. They sent us into it. I didn't argue. I'd heard my own language spit back at me, broken, jagged. The thing in the static wasn't learning fast, but it was learning. That night, I tied a strip of corn pollen pouch to the radio antenna. The captain saw me and cursed, saying I was filling men's heads with nonsense. But I saw the way his hand shook when the radio hissed alive again, whispering his own name in a voice just off enough to feel like a knife at the ear. The men whispered about skinwalkers. They didn't know the word, but they knew the idea. Something that wears you, learns you, until no one knows the difference. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Big Red's jacket lying torn to the tree line. And behind it, those 4-toed prints walking away in the sand like they owned the night. The island wasn't just watching us anymore. It was talking back. And soon, it was going to speak in voices we couldn't ignore. When you're a code talker, you're told your words are a weapon sharper than steel. I never thought I'd live to hear my own weapon turned against me. 2 days after the ambush, the jungle went quiet. No cicadas, no birds, no drip of water. Just silence, so heavy it pressed on your skull. Men whispered that it felt like a church before the coffin lid closes. That morning, the radio carried a voice clear as daylight. It was the captain's. Move north, Ridge. Full squad. Urgent. The lieutenant barked the order without question. We packed gear, lifted stretchers with the wounded, and pushed in the undergrowth. Every step sank deep into mud that smelled like rust and rot. But something gnawed at me. The captain's voice had been too clean. No static, no lag, no breath. Just perfect, cold words sliding out of the earpiece. Lopez leaned toward me as we hiked. Did you hear it? Too clear, like someone wearing his throat. I didn't answer. We reached the ridge by midday. No captain, no squad, nothing but churned soil and the stink of burned feathers. That's when Private Harris spotted them. Four-toed prints circling the clearing, layered over themselves so thick it looked like something had been dancing. Trap, I whispered, and then the ridge erupted. This time it wasn't bullets. It was voices. From the trees came shouts in English, Japanese, and Navajo all tangled together. My grandmother's lullaby twisted into a war cry, a commander's order echoing through 3 different throats at once. The men spun in circles, rifles raised, not sure who to fire at. Lopez dropped to his knees and covered his ears. It's in the words, he screamed. The lieutenant tried to restore order. He raised his pistol and shouted for calm, but a voice identical to his own screamed, "Fire!" from the opposite tree line. Half the squad let loose. Bullets shredded leaves, snapped trunks, and tore into our own line. When the smoke cleared, Harris lay bleeding out, staring at me with glassy eyes. "Why'd you shoot me?" he asked, though it wasn't my bullet that took him. Men turned on each other with suspicion, as sharp as bayonets. If the island could wear our voices, how could we trust any order, any cry for help? That night, the camp split into 2 groups, those who clung to orders and those who clung to prayer. The captain called the believers cowards, said superstition was rotting discipline. But when he walked away, I saw him glance at the tree-line like a man checking if the dark still had his name. Lopez came to me, trembling. "Your people know how to fight this. You have to." I told him my grandmother's stories weren't weapons. They were warnings. But warnings are useless when the thing they warn about is already inside your tent, whispering with your friend's voice. That night, the radio clicked alive again. "Brother," it said in Big Red's voice. Come back to the trees." The men froze. Some looked ready to follow. Others raised their rifles to the set, as if bullets could kill static. I pressed the mic and spoke in Navajo. "We are shielded. You cannot enter." The radio hissed, then answered in broken Navajo. The syllables bent wrong, like bones set at bad angles. But the meaning was clear, already inside. The tent walls shivered with a wind that wasn't there. Outside, the 4-toed prints circled fresh in the sand. Sleep abandoned us. Men paced with rifles cocked, staring at one another, as if every familiar face could split open and show something else beneath. The sound of whispered orders traveled the camp, always from the shadows. "Move left. Guard the ridge. Help me." One man vanished on guard duty, leaving only his helmet. Inside it lay a strip of torn fabric, braided like the talisman I tied around my wrist. By dawn, discipline collapsed. No one trusted the chain of command. No one trusted the radio. We had become a squad of ghosts, alive but already lost. I remember my grandmother's voice. If something learns your name, it can step into your skin. The island hadn't just learned our names. It had learned our language, our orders, our prayers. Lopez sat across from me, face gray with fear. "Tell me straight. If it wears your voice, how do I know it's you?" I didn't have an answer. By midday, the captain ordered another patrol. None of us wanted to follow, but obedience still lived in our bones. We marched, each step heavier than the last. Halfway to the ridge, the radio sparked again. "Fall back," the captain's voice barked. The captain was standing 5 feet away from me. Men froze. Rifles rose. Eyes darted between the flesh and blood officer and the voice in the static. The captain shouted for calm, but the radio shouted louder. The 2 voices overlapped until they were indistinguishable. Lopez whispered, "It's already got him." I felt something cold settle in my gut. Whether or not it was true didn't matter. The seed was planted. Trust was gone. And on that island, without trust, you were already dead. By the 4th night, no one slept. We sat with rifles across our knees, waiting for the radio to breathe again. The captain had stopped using it altogether, but it didn't matter. It came alive without him. Sometimes it was his voice. Sometimes it was Big Red's laugh, stretched too far. And sometimes it was something in between, half human, half broken sound, like a throat trying on words that didn't fit. Lopez wouldn't leave my side. He said I was the only one whose prayers held the noise at bay. But my grandmother's chants weren't shields. They were warnings, brittle and old. Still, I clung to them. When the men looked at me, they looked for hope. The fifth morning, the captain snapped. He dragged us into the clearing where the shrine stood, bones gleaming under dew. He pointed at the circle and shouted, "We'll burn this filth out." The others hesitated. Even the ones who scoffed at superstition kept their boots planted on the edge, as if the ground inside belonged to something else. The captain grabbed a can of fuel, splashed it over the bones, and struck a match. The fire leapt, smoke curling black and acrid. The circle screamed, not from the flames, but from inside the radio slung on my back. It shrieked with every voice it had stolen: Dunn, Harris, Big Red, overlapping in a chorus that rattled our teeth. Men dropped to their knees, covering their ears. Lopez vomited into the dirt. Then came the movement. Shapes darted between trees, low and fast, shadows that flickered like broken film. They weren't Japanese soldiers. They weren't animals either. They moved on all fours, but too fluid, too deliberate. The air stank of rot and iron. "Open fire," the captain roared. The clearing exploded in gunfire. Bullets tore bark, shredded branches, split trunks. Screams echoed back. Not ours, not theirs, but a mimicry of both, feeding our panic. I dropped to my belly and pressed my cheek to the earth. I whispered in Navajo, words my grandmother used when storms broke over sheep pens. Keep them safe, hold them close, guide their steps. For a moment, the shrieking in the radio faltered. The voices staggered, tangled, lost their rhythm. I felt the men's eyes on me, the same way they looked at the captain. One wore steel, the other wore prayer. They didn't know which to follow. Then Lopez shouted, "It's wearing Dunn." I looked up. At the tree-line, a figure stood. Dunn's uniform, Dunn's height, even Dunn's rifle slung over his shoulder. But his face stretched too thin, like clay pulled over bone. The eyes were wrong, flat, glossy, as if painted on. The captain raised his pistol. Fire, but my gut twisted. If we shot, we'd be feeding it. That was the warning in every story my grandmother told. You don't kill what wears another's skin. You strip its power with ritual. I shouted over the captain, my voice raw, "Circle, face out." Some obeyed, some didn't. The squad split right there. Half opened fire at the figure, tearing it into shreds that dissolved like smoke. The other half fell into my circle, rifles outward, chanting words they didn't know, just following my lead. The radio wailed again, but softer now, as if gagged. The captain stormed toward me, eyes bloodshot. "You undermine my command again, and I'll." The rest of his threat drowned under a scream. Not from the trees. From above. Something dropped from the canopy. A blur of limbs, claws, and teeth. It landed on Sergeant Miller, tore his throat before he could fire, then scuttled back into the dark. For a second, the jungle came alive, dozens of shapes darting, circling, testing us. Not attacking all at once. Playing. Lopez gripped my arm. They want us to break rank. They feed on it. He was right. Every story said the same. They thrive on chaos, on fear, on words turned against you. So I kept speaking. I spoke louder than the radio, louder than the captain. I called on Hazo, balance, harmony, begged it to hold just long enough for us to breathe. The men in the circle steadied. Their rifles tracked shapes, but didn't fire. They listened. Even Lopez's hand stopped shaking. The others, the ones who followed the captain, kept shooting at shadows. Each muzzle flash was answered by a scream in a stolen voice. Their fear fed the thing. One by one, they fell. By dawn, half the squad was gone. Miller, Harris, two others ripped apart in silence. The captain stood outside the circle, chest heaving, pistol empty. His face was gray with fury and fear. "You'll answer for this," he spat. "You've infected them with your witch tales." But he didn't step closer. Not once. The shapes had melted back into the trees with the light. Only the shrine remained, bones now blackened and cracked, smoke still curling from the fire. I unstrapped a radio and placed it inside the circle. Its hiss sputtered, fading to silence. For the first time in days, it didn't speak back. Lopez looked at me, eyes hollow. "We can't stay here. The island knows us now. I knew he was right, but orders bound us like chains. The captain would drag us deeper, even if the trees swallowed every last name. That night, as the men dozed in shifts, I heard the radio click alive once more. Just 3 words, in a voice almost mine, already inside you. By the 5th night, we were fewer than half. The clearing stank of old smoke and blood. Every man's eyes twitched to the tree-lean, waiting for the next voice to betray us. The captain had gone silent, his command unraveling along with his sanity. He sat on a log, pistol in his lap, muttering to himself in English and broken Japanese as though he couldn't tell the difference anymore. He refused to look at me, but I could feel the heat of his hate, not for the enemy, but for me, for the circle, for the prayers. The radio sat in the dirt, wrapped in a strip of cloth I'd tied to its antenna. It had been quiet all day, too quiet, a silence like the pause before thunder. Lopez crouched beside me, whispering, "It's not finished. It's waiting." He was right. The island didn't just want our bodies. It wanted our words, our trust, our voices. It wanted to wear us until the war itself became its camouflage. That night, the silence broke. It started as Big Red's laugh, stretched and frayed, but familiar enough to twist the knife. Then came Dunn's voice, begging for water. Then Harris, calling for his mother. The voices layered, rising until it was all of them, every man we'd lost, crying through the static. The men wavered. Some stood, staring into the trees as if hypnotized. The captain finally snapped. He rose, face wild, and screamed, "They're not dead. They're out there. Follow me." He charged into the tree-lean before anyone could stop him. For a moment we heard his pistol barking in the dark. Then a scream cut off sharp. Silence followed, and when the radio crackled again, it was his voice speaking back to us. "Advance. Northridge. All clear." The words were perfect. No static. No hesitation. Just his voice, stolen clean. The squad fractured. Some shouted to follow, desperate for any chain of command left. Others clung to me, eyes wide, waiting for prayer instead of orders. I raised my rifle and spoke loud enough for the night to hear. "That is not our captain." The tree-lean answered with his laugh, broken like shattered glass. The shapes came then, dozens of them, crawling low, circling. Their eyes glowed faint like coals, their limbs too long, their skin loose as if borrowed from corpses. Every step they took dragged our names deeper into the dirt. We had 2 choices, scatter and feed them, or stand and fight like ghosts with rifles. I chose both. I told Lopez and the others to form a circle again. I whispered the old words, louder this time, my throat raw with them. I told the men to fire only at what broke the line, not at the shadows, not at the voices. The shapes tested us. They darted close, screeched in stolen tongues, tried to make us break. Bullets spat from the rifles, but only when one lunged too near. Each time we held steady, they pulled back, chattering like coyotes. The radio screamed in the captain's voice, "Break circle, retreat." None moved, so tried again. My grandmother's voice this time, soft and low, "Child, come home. You're safe." My hand shook. For a breath, I almost believed it, almost stepped out. But then I remembered, my grandmother never said safe. She said balanced. She said walk in beauty. That broke the spell. I ripped the radio from the dirt, tore the strip free, and smashed it against the stone shrine. Metal split, sparks spat, wires coiled out like guts. The voices shrieked, a chorus folding in on itself. The shapes screamed with them, clawing the air as if something vital had been torn away. The men fired into the chaos. One by one the shapes dissolved, turning to ash and smoke that curled back into the soil. When dawn came, the tree-lean stood still again. No prints in the sand, no whispers, only silence, heavy and hollow. We counted the living, 6 of us out of nearly 20. Lopez alive, face gray and eyes sunken. The others too shell-shocked to speak. The shrine lay shattered, bones blackened, shells cracked. The radio was nothing but twisted steel. The captain never returned. We reported it as an ambush, heavy casualties, enemy deception. The brass stamped the paper, nodded, and moved on. No one wrote about the 4-toed prints. No one wrote about the voices. But I remember. Even now, When I close my eyes, I hear Big Red's laugh bending wrong in the static. Sometimes I wake with the taste of iron in my mouth, as if the island still breathes through me. The war ended, but not for me. Not for Lopez. He drank himself quiet in the years after. The last time I saw him, he whispered, "It never stopped. It still knows my name." I believe him. Language is power. We used ours as a shield, but the island turned it into a knife. That's the last lesson I carried home. Words can be stolen, twisted, worn like skin. And once something else speaks with your voice, you never know if the echo that answers you in the dark is still yours. So if you hear someone call your name from the trees, don't answer.